Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to the channel. Hey, we're going to be talking about Forondil today. Forondil is going to be one of the strongest duelists in the game, in my opinion, especially if it's coming down to farm hitting, okay? We're going to talk about him because I've got him awakened. I spent about 500 universals plus 200 wheel spins to get him there on my stream last night, but we did get him awakened, and so I want to go over him first. Now, if you're one of those types of people that prefers like a quick down and easy for each of these guides, I do have written guides on my Discord, the dojo. I will have a link to that Discord in the description below. Please stop by. Please check out the guides. I put a lot of work into them. I think you'll like them. Alright, so for those that don't know me, my name is Swift. I'm very excited to finally be trying my hand at making video guides. It's something I've wanted to do for a while now. I've got the written guides done that I want to get done. Now it's time to put some videos with them. I generally stream on the weekends. My Twitch can be found in the description below. If you have any questions, if you just want to chop it up with me, please stop by. Do not hesitate. I love theory crafting and that sort of thing. I do plan to make a video guide to match each of my written hero guides and other content as we go, so please consider subscribing if you want to see some more. Now, Forondil. Okay, before we get too far gone with everything, we want to make sure we go over the skills and make sure everybody knows exactly what this character can do, because he is pretty nuts. As far as his first skill is concerned, he does damage, and he inflicts a debuff called Cowardice. Now, Cowardice is going to stop any incoming normal attacks from that march for 3 seconds. Pretty insane. It obviously scales there, so up to 1200 damage, up to 3 seconds for the duration. His second skill just gives him some defense penetration. We do like defense penetration. It's always going to be useful on every march pretty much, except for maybe our low base attack infantry. So we'll have to see in the future if they come out with some better attack infantry. But defense penetration is usually good across the board. As far as Song of Swiftness, this is a 2-part. We get 20% march speed, 10% damage dealt if Forondil is the commander. If he's the deputy, we get 10% hero skill damage dealt, okay? And then a reduction in the cost of our rage skill, about 50. Scales up there. The fourth skill is all your legions gain an attack bonus upon entering battle, which is 40% attack bonus. Now, this is a little misleading. Some people thought at first that this was going to apply to literally all of your legions in the field, but we do now know that it only applies to Forondil's Legion. So a little bit of a typo there. I'm sure they'll fix that going forward, but just note that this only affects Forondil and his Legion. Now, that bonus does taper off, so every 20 seconds you'll lose 5% of that bonus. But generally speaking, with cavalry, especially if you're like farm hitting or something, you don't really need to worry about the tapering effect because you're not going to be in a battle for more than 30 to 40 seconds anyways. So it's still going to be a huge, huge boost to your attack. Now, as Awakening, if you have it, Forondil's Legion launches a normal attack against a Legion that has Cowardice. They have a 50% chance of inflicting physical defense break and slowing the target for 3 seconds. It can only be triggered once every 5 seconds, so keep that in mind. But it's a 20% defense break, and it's also a 20% movement speed reduction. This is super good for chasing down marches and basically just like overall just, helping you stick to a target, deal damage to them, and, put them out of commission. Now, all these skills that we just went over are just excellent skills for dueling. I mean, especially with, infantry, not infantry, archers generally being the best at dueling, at least for most characters. Cavalry really needed somebody like this to kind of put them in check. They already do a lot of damage to archers, and they can usually blow them up pretty well, especially if you have like a skill tree cavalry like Theodore or Bakshi. But having all these abilities that are just really good at making sure that Forondil wins that 1v1, very, very needed and necessary. And that's why he's so strong. He's also flying, so keep that in mind. So I suppose we should talk about investment. That's usually a question that a lot of people have. Like, hey, should I put my mana stones in this? Hey, should I invest in it? Generally, the consensus that I've found with Forondil from other people that I've spoken to, and also just my experience in general, Forondil is a very good character to invest your mana stones into. I think that he is just very, very good at what he does. Cavalry are naturally good at dueling, and so having a character that not only is naturally good at dueling, but then also brings skills into the mix that help with the dueling. Super, super good. The only thing I would say is if you're more of an open field PvPer, like if you like those big fights, you might want to just stay away from cavalry for right now. They're not really good in those fights. I mean, a lot of times you charge in with cavalry, you get focused by, 10 units because you're the nearest unit to them, and then you just die pretty quickly, right? Take a lot of sev wounds, you don't deal a lot of sev wounds. It's not necessarily ideal for cavalry to participate in those large open fights. You also don't see them in behemoths that much. Some people do run cavalry on some of the behemoths, but generally speaking, you're not going to see cavalry doing too well in behemoths, either. So my recommendation is look for those small scale skirmishes if you want to chase units down, if you want to farm hit especially, things like that. Farm hitting is super important in this game. It is seriously some of the best value you can get in the game in terms of merits and sev wound trading. It's going to be the best hands down. So don't listen to those salty people in chat that get mad about farm hitting. They should be doing it too. Moving right along, we're going to talk about talents next. I mean, that's probably what everyone's here for anyways. His talents are tricky. We'll actually do this in our Roots of War. But his talents are tricky because of the simple fact that he has some strange trees for cavalry. Control, cavalry, PvP. And this is not the talent tree, so. But anyways, I'll kind of do like a step-by-step here and explain my reasoning for this. So obviously, we take the first node here. We're going to take speed always. On every march, I think speed is just super good on every march. I don't really see the point in ever getting, some extra defense unless you just want to make a stupidly tanky march for something like behemoths. Generally speaking, the speed is just going to be better. We take health, obviously. And then we have our balanced heart, which is all units in your legion gain 1% attack and 5% march speed. So speeding us up a little bit. Now, I take control tree, okay? And it's important to understand a few reasons why. One of the big reasons why is because it synergizes so well with his pet. So the Berserk Phaedrake is the pet pretty much designed for our boy here, Forondil, because it has the unique effect of scaling these stacks as you inflict debuffs, and the cowardice debuff is something that is going to make you generate more stacks, okay? So we'll talk about that more later, but realistically, also, the control tree is just kind of like your best option for damage in general, in my opinion. So we do dip into the cavalry tree a little bit with this build that I'm going to be showing you guys, but yeah, we'll start with the control tree first. So movement speed first, obviously, always good on cavalry. Now I take attack here, increase attack, just because it's always good there as well. Head held high is also a very good rage generation talent. I think it's really important to start trying to get the talents that are going to give us the most rage generation so that we can cycle his cowardice debuff. The more we can blind that target, the less damage they can do back to us. And when we're farm hitting, the only thing we're worried about is, I guess, counterattack damage too, right? But we're mainly concerned about them normal attacking us, because when you're farm hitting, that's really all that's going to hit you. You don't have to worry about artifacts hitting you. You don't have to worry about other legions hitting you, anything like that. So generally speaking, you just need to get that blind off as much as possible, and head held high, rage generation in general is going to help us with that. Now, we have between Cyclone Seal, which is when casting rage skills inflicts slow on the target legion, reducing their march speed by 15% for 3 seconds. We also have Soul Siphon. Counterattacks have a 10% chance to steal 40 rage from the enemy legion. Now, this one was a difficult one because both of these are good for what we're trying to accomplish. Ultimately, I decided on Cyclone Seal. And the reason why is because it is another debuff that we can have proc for our pet. Okay, and just kind of get that pet scaling. And then this one, Soul Siphon, we're not going to be doing a ton of counterattacks. Something like a Haas Kanara that's going to get hit by like 10 legions, or even if there was like a control tree for infantry where they're getting hit by a lot of legions at one time, this would be a lot better on those kind of characters. But realistically, we're looking for that 1v1 in the farm hitting. We're looking for hitting reinforcement marches that aren't paying attention, so they're not even going to be hitting us back. So therefore, we just get less value with Soul Siphon in general on cavalry marches. Okay, so we do take Cyclone Seal. It does slow them down. That's also huge because if they do realize, hey, I'm being hit, then it slows them down so they can't get away really easily. And then if it's like, if they have the talent, the gathering talent that makes their march automatically retreat, this is going to help with that as well. Okay, so Cyclone Seal is our next our first major talent that we're going to take. Then obviously we're going to take this one as well. This is Blindside. It's the same idea. As soon as you enter enter combat, you're going to slow the target legion, reducing their march speed by 6%. This scales up to 30, okay, which we will take all 5 points into that. This is, again, adding another debuff for our pet, but it's also slowing that march if it's a reinforcement march, or if we're just chasing someone down. There's a plethora of benefits with Blindside. Now, you may wonder, okay, well, why did you take Blindside if you have Cyclone Seal? Well, the simple answer is this happens on rage skills, okay? Generally speaking, it depends on what type of cavalry you're running. If you're running the ranged Elven cavalry, okay, you're going to have a little while before you hit your rage skill because they don't have Unyielding Rush, which is where you go into battle and you get 1,000 rage immediately on the melee cavalry. So they don't have that. So because of that, this will be pretty much going into effect when this is wearing off. Okay, a lot of times, depending on your pairings and things like that. So that's why I like to have this. We slow them immediately, and then we go straight into continuously slowing them with Cyclone Seal. And it's also just another debuff that we need to get for our pet's damage. Okay, so the next part is obviously Ambush. This one is so good. It's so good. When your Legion launches a normal attack, they have a 10% chance to inflict defense break on the target Legion, reducing their defense by 1% up to 5%. Now this one's really good because it's another way for you to get that defense break on the target. Now, if your Forondil is not awakened, which most of yours are not awakened, so this guide is for you, then generally speaking, Ambush is going to be super, super good value for you. Now, if your Forondil is awakened, then we could take something like this where we inflict Gloom on the target instead to reduce their attack, and you can put 5 points into that instead of our Ambush. Now, the next two talents are pretty straightforward. If we look here, we have Sage or our Lucky Stars. Lucky Stars grants healing factor of 30 whenever your Legion inflicts a debuff effect on the enemy Legion. Problem with this, it can only happen once every 10 seconds, so it does undermine its value a bit, but we also don't really care about healing factor that much. It just doesn't, it's not super great, unless you can get a lot of it. I just don't really think healing factors is very good. The other one is Sage. Your Legion has a 50% chance to gain synergy every time they inflict a debuff effect on an enemy Legion, increasing their hero skill damage dealt by 1% for 10 seconds. And this obviously does stack up to 5%. We take 5 points in this because it does synergize really well. We are applying quite a few debuffs, so we're gonna have some pretty good uptime on this, and it does increase our rage skill damage as well. And then the last two, we have Autumn Rains and Reticent. Reticent is when your Legion casts a rage skill, they have a 25% chance to silence a target, preventing them from casting rage skills for 2 seconds. The last one, Autumn Rains, when casting rage skills, a buff effect is dispelled from the target Legion. This effect can only be triggered once every 20 seconds. Again, I think the cooldown, the timing on this one for Autumn Rains kind of kills it. I think it was like a 5-second cooldown or maybe a 10-second to make it more in line with other talents. It would be a lot better. 5 seconds might be a little too overpowered, but this is the control tree, so I don't really understand why this has to be such a long cooldown. Most of your fights are going to be like between 40 seconds to a minute anyways with most Legions, so it doesn't really make sense to have something like this where you can strip maybe one buff, and it may not even be a useful buff, right? So with that being the case, I think that this needs some adjustments for it to be a really good option. However, Reticent is very, very strong. If you do get the silence off, keep in mind you can proc it twice. So if your first Legion hits them and silences them, then your second Legion follows up after about 2 or 3 seconds. They use their rage skill, and if you hit them again, then you can silence them for a total of like 4 seconds. Okay, so this can be a very strong option because not only are you preventing their skill damage, their normal attack damage with your cowardice debuff, but then you're also preventing them from doing any rage skill until we get that health bar a little lower, which is really nice because then we take less damage. So I do take Reticent for the major talent here. I just don't really think there's any other alternative for this, at least for Forondil. Okay, so then we move over to our cavalry tree, and this is where we're going to start getting the buffs that are going to help us kind of like take this build to the next level. The first one, I really love cavalry speed because it's 3%. On the cavalry tree. So this goes up to 15%. It's a lot of movement speed. You get 50% more than any other node. So this only gives you 10. This only gives you 10 after it's stacked up. So it's really, really good value. So we take 5 points into that for sure because we have to anyways. The next one is really up to you, actually. You can do Adrenaline Rush. Your Legion deals 0.8% more normal attack damage. This is really good on Elven Cavalry, the range cavalry, because they already get that 30% attack buff when they go into battle. So this would be something to consider on Elven range cavalry. I really like that idea. Or if you're using Freygar as your secondary, because she buffs the crit rate and the crit damage of your normal attacks. So because of that, this could be a really good option as well. I'm pretty standard when it comes to these kind of buffs. I just kind of like to take the attack. Plus, this is a larger attack bonus than we normally get because we're using a cavalry specific one. So the next point, obviously head held high. We want to proc this as much as possible because we want to keep the uptime on the cowardice debuff. So head held high is going to be my next option. You could do something like this, intimidation, where you do more skill damage. But realistically, the scaling on Forondil's skill, and then also the scaling on most of the characters you're going to pair him with, isn't super high, except for like maybe Emrys. Emrys is pretty high. If you do put him with someone like Theodore for the skill tree, then you're probably going to be using Theodore's tree anyways. So this doesn't really matter, right? So realistically, you'll be just taking head held high for the debuff uptime. Now, the major nodes here we have are Steady Pace and Perfect Furiosity. This one is your Legion gains synergy when they enter battle, increasing their hero skill damage dealt by 15% for 10 seconds. And then our Steady Pace is when your Legion consists entirely of cavalry units, they gain a shield upon leaving a building. The shield factor is 600. This effect can be triggered once every 60 seconds. I do not like this talent. I think it's honestly just super, super bad. The only time I can think of ever using this talent is if you're doing some shenanigans where you're defending like one of your towers and they have a bunch of builders on it, right? And then you pop out of your city, generate that rage really quickly, throw out spring blades, and then pop back into your city. So you're doing some like harassment there. Or just harassing in general, I guess, if you have ranged cavalry or something like that. That's like the only time, but realistically, it's a 60-second cooldown. I don't know about you, but I'm not going to spend 1,000 gems to change the entire tree just to get the 600 damage shield. It's just probably not worth it. So overall, this one's going to be our best bet. When your Legion gains synergy, when they enter battle, they get 15% hero skill damage. This is really good for the Elven Flying Cavalry, anything with Unyielding Rush. Okay, it's really good for them because they're going to get that skill off immediately. So they get 1,000 rage from Unyielding Rush. So they get the benefit of synergy immediately. And then they are going to get probably 1 or maybe even 2, depending on what characters you have, more skills off before this ends, which is really, really good. So 15% more damage it's a lot of damage. So we take that over the other one here just because it just makes more sense. Now, our last point here, it's going to go into this. I usually like to make sure that we get the most bang for our buck for the 1 point, right? And this is, I think, my option for that, okay? And the reason being is because it's another debuff, okay, for your pet. Synergizes well with your pet. But also because, proccing debuffs is always good, no matter what. A lot of times, it's when you proc a debuff on an enemy, it's going to be something that benefits your whole team. So even if this is only a 1% attack reduction, it's reducing that attack by 1%. And if you're in some kind of like minor skirmish with these cavalry where there's several legions on your side, several legions on their side, then you can reduce that overall attack to all of your allies for 5 seconds, which can be useful. Okay, so I just found this more useful than any of the other talents. Debuffs are hard to come by in cavalry trees, like in general. So Tremble is our go-to option. Obviously, if you have Forondil Awakened, then you're going to be putting 5 points here into Tremble, so you would just put that additional point down here into Ambush. Now, in terms of pairings, which is going to be the next big question that we have for Forondil, Forondil can pair with quite a few people, I think, especially just because he's flying doesn't mean he has to pair with flying units, right? If you're elves, though, that's going to be very beneficial for you because you got the flying cavalry, right? So when we're looking at flying pairs for Forondil, I think that one of his best pairs is going to be Freygar. And just because she has a lot of benefits that kind of help him with the duelist aspect of things, it allows him to, do more damage with his normal attacks, which is where a majority of your damage is going to come from. She has an active skill that does damage. It doesn't do a lot of damage, but it does do damage, so it's going to help with that. She also has this Legion Rage accumulation speed reduction, which counts as a debuff, by the way. Even though it's not a named debuff, it does count as a debuff. So Falconer's Charge can apply a debuff for his pet. And then if you have her Awakened, it doesn't really do anything. Her Awakening is kind of trash, but it does give her 200 more damage. So this is something that you can consider. I think I'll be running Freygar as, kind of a preliminary test for sort of, for most things. I think she's a very good option for him. Now, another character that I kind of want to experiment with is Thea. And now, hear me out, because this is a little odd, but Thea has a lot of skills that synergize well with flying units as it is. But the thing about Thea is we hit them with our cowardice, which blinds them for 3 seconds, okay? After 3 seconds, our deputy is going to use their skill. So we blind them for 3 seconds, then Thea comes in, uses her skill, and uses a shield, okay? So now you have a shield. So they're blinded for 3 seconds, and now you have a shield for when they do attack you again to block some of that damage until the Rage Machine kicks your Rage ability back into play. So then it just becomes this infinite loop of mitigation where you're blinding the target, then you're gaining a shield to mitigate any damage until you can blind the target again. And so it just keeps on going and going. It seems really, really good in theory. I need to test it out. I will try this out for sure, especially if you have some good investment in Thea. I've been pretty blessed with my point usage here. It went all into the first skill. Obviously, I made that happen. And then we had the Purging Wind, which in my opinion is one of the better skills on Thea for Forondil, because it's just going to give us that march speed. He is kind of slow if you don't have a mobility tree with him. He is kind of slow. So, I think Thea would be a good option as well. Again, that's experimental. I don't know a whole lot on that, but we will have to try to see where that lines up. Now, another good option for Forondil is Theodore, actually, which, no surprise there. Theodore is going to be a character that, he's the character that came with him. So because of that, I'm sure there's going to be some synergy there. Theodore does have a bruise mechanic, so that is a debuff that would help with, applying or, getting the pet to pop off a little bit there. The other thing, too, is Coup de Grace, this skill here, will give you a stack of Consul's Mark every time you inflict a debuff via the hero skill, okay? Now, you're inflicting debuffs with Forondil's hero skill. So because of that, he's going to gain an extra mark there, and then he gains one here too, okay? So it's a good idea to get this character in there as kind of like a nuke almost, right? If you're going to use a ground Legion, he's going to do a lot of damage with this skill, okay? So you're going to blind them, and then you're going to hit them really hard with Theodore's skill, and then also apply that 30% bruise, which means that Legion that you're fighting is going to do a lot less damage, okay? So Coup de Grace is a very good skill to buff up that first skill, right? I think that Theodore could see some use. If you're on a whale server, or if you're a whale yourself and you have him awakened, then you're seeing a lot of benefits that are helping you become a better duelist with this character. Taking 25% less normal attack damage is nuts. It's absolutely nuts. It's going to help you with those pesky archers, especially marches like Sindrian, that sort of thing. So, and then we get some defense as well, and some extra march speed with Trader's Ambition. So this one's good too, but this is for garrisoning and city strongholds, so we're not going to really go into that too much. The last pairing I want to talk about is for more of our free-to-play people here, If maybe you've only invested in one character and it was Forondil because he's your favorite, then we can come down here to Craig. Okay, Craig is a good option because he has the mobility tree. And I mean, that automatically makes him a good option for someone like Forondil, who is going to be zooming around the map with flying cavalry a lot of the times. And so, yeah, I mean, Craig's also flying. So you can do some pretty cool things with him. When he's awakened, he does a lot of damage. He does a lot more damage than you would think. 600, especially if you're hitting groups of enemies. 600 damage, and then he also has the ability to proc a bleed. Actually, it's 800, sorry. 800 damage, and he can proc a bleed for 3 seconds, which is another 600 damage. Okay. The other thing, too, is he's got increased attack, increased defense, and then he's got also increased hero skill damage and march speed bonus of 20%. So him as your lead gives you 20% movement speed, and then also the mobility tree, which can be very, very good. But so I would say, as far as, you know, free-to-play players are concerned, Craig is a good option. And honestly, even if you're not free-to-play, he might still be a good option there as well. Artifacts here. Artifacts are... They are pretty straightforward for almost all the cavalry units. Let's actually go to a different menu here so that we can see all of our artifacts if we don't have some of them, which I don't think we have too many missing. None that would matter for this, except for Oath of Stormpeak, which we'll talk about. But as far as artifacts are concerned, realistically, Spring Blades is going to be your go-to, especially if you're in a legion with like Emrys, right, where you gain passion. If you're getting passion in your legion, you definitely want to take Spring Blades, because Spring Blades has this extra effect here. When the legion lead is under the passion effect, it grants keen effect when you cast it, so that gives you another 30% attack. So it's pretty good with any units that provide passion. But outside of that, Spring Blades is just nuts in general. It's a very, very strong artifact. It does a ton of damage. You don't really have time to move out of it, even if you're a faster march. It's just going to be our best value right now, currently, for our cavalry marches. Other options to consider, I prefer, you have Kingslayer and Sorlin's Blade. Both of these are like interchangeable almost. Personally, I prefer Sorlin's Blade because usually you're in the back line and you're chopping people up, right? Like that's kind of what you're doing. And because of that, you know, we value the march speed. The march speed is important for doing, you know, shenanigans in the back line and for farm hitting in general. It allows you to get away from people that are chasing you. It allows you to quickly kill farm after farm before they can say, hey, or put out an announcement, hey, somebody's farm killing. Can you guys, you know, pull your farms home? There's just a lot of benefits to having extra speed, and they do similar damage. I mean, this one definitely doesn't do as much damage as Kingslayer, but it does similar damage. Now, the other thing, too, is if you are farm hitting, you can't use your artifact on resource nodes. So if somebody's in a resource node, you won't hit them with either of these artifacts, and therefore, there's no real reason to prioritize an artifact that does the most damage, okay? Generally speaking, if you're using these artifacts, it's probably while you're running away from someone. And the good thing about Sorlin's Blade is you can hit them and then you get 20% haste, which allows you to get away from those marches a lot easier, okay? Otherwise, you can take Kingslayer. Either way, doesn't really matter. If you prefer to have double attack, then you can take Kingslayer. That is completely fine as well. The last two that I would say that are, you know, somewhat useful, Spirit of the... I don't have either of these, actually. Visage of the Sanctus, actually, is another one you could use, okay? If you just want to tank your march with more sustain, especially if you're running Thea, this could be useful because it's going to give you, you know, some boon shields. It gives you flying unit defense. But generally speaking, this is more of an experimental suggestion. I would probably stay away from this one. You can try it, see if it works for you, if it works for your playstyle, especially when farm hitting. It's going to give you a lot of value there. But realistically, this is more of an experimental recommendation. Our other experimental recommendation is going to be Oath of Stormpeak. I don't have access to it yet. I don't think anyone has access. Actually, no, we don't have access to this one at all yet. Unless you got lucky on the artifact event that went by, which you should not be spending any crystals on that. But if you did and you got it, then this would be our next option. Now, a lot of people are saying this is trash, which I can see their point, right? 1,600% damage taken on the clone means that clone is going to evaporate, right? It's going to die very quickly. And it doesn't do a whole lot of your legion's damage, okay? The one thing to note about this, though, is this thing does all of the same things. Like the clone does all the same things as your normal March. It just does them while taking increased damage and dealing less damage. Okay? So with that in mind, you can inflict cowardice multiple times. So let's say you run in with your first March, okay? You hit that Legion and inflict cowardice. You can have your second March come in slightly after that, hit that Legion, inflict cowardice, because they both get unyielding rush, because they both get that skill. So I think that there's some potential here for some crazy shenanigans. The other thing too is if you have a single March and you clone it and it has Emrys in it, Emrys has a skill that allows him to do bonus damage to surrounded targets. Well, this is a good way to get the surrounded bonus, right? So there is some potential for this artifact. I may pull it. I may do an additional talk on this in future videos, but right now it's experimental because we don't have our hands on it, at least not in mass yet, and we don't really know how good it's going to be when we take it out into the field. Keep in mind, you do get Rampage, which is just a pure damage dealt increase when your Legion inflicts cowardice, so it does work well with Forondil as well. And that's it. Those are my thoughts on Forondil. I think he's going to be a great addition to Cavalry Heroes. If you stuck around this whole time for this video, it was a long one, so thank you, I appreciate you. Make sure you hit subscribe, make sure you like the video, and until next time.